Hello guys, today we're going to be doing a video on Call of Duty Black Ops 3 using the Steam Deck. We're going to be starting it off with 800p on the low preset. Alright, let's jump into it. Alright, now here's the thing with Black Ops 3. The single player is pretty bad. I don't think anyone likes it really. Maybe some people still do, but majority of people, they pretty much ignore it. And the multiplayer is either dead or hacked, even if you do find a lobby, so that's pretty unplayable as well at that point. So I'm pretty much forced into zombies. So I'm going to be testing out the Steam Deck in zombies, and I'll be testing out different maps as I go. It won't be perfect, but it will give you a basic understanding or basic idea of how it's going to run. But so far, we are sitting in the 50s FPS range, and we can't hold a steady 60. I did try it out on Moon at high settings, and I could hold 60 FPS for a decent amount of time. But I don't really spent too much time on it, I just wanted to start recording. So the game does stutter a little bit as well. A Steam update actually broke this game on Windows and on the Steam Deck as well. So the game will stutter heaps in the menus. It's pretty unplayable, but apparently it does fix itself if you install the DLCs. But I've only installed the zombies stuff, and the campaign and multiplayer stuff is uninstalled because it takes up too much space. So for me, it does stutter heaps in the menus, but in the game it's not that bad. It does get some micro stuttering here and there, but for the most part it is definitely playable. I actually remember when this game came out in 2015, I believe. I was using a GTX 750 Ti and I could not play this game. I would get around 30 to 40 FPS at 1080p. And I was forced to play at 720p to even get 50 to 60 FPS. So it's kind of crazy that the Steam Deck can actually handle this game quite easily. Getting 50 to 60 FPS. We are playing on low settings, but we do have heaps of headroom again on our GPU. So we shouldn't have any issues playing at those higher settings as well. And what's funny is that in the settings, you actually get the option to play at the extra preset, which is the max preset. And at the time, if your GPU wasn't powerful enough, you wouldn't get access to the extra preset. I want to go ahead and play on Kino, try a new map out, and as you can see, different maps will play differently and perform differently. We were able to get 60 FPS on Kino so far, and the game definitely does look better as well. We had some shadow issues and some weird texture issues with the shadows. It looked very blocky and pixelated. Hopefully medium settings can fix that, but I guess we'll see. So far the game's running quite well. It is very CPU intensive, as you can see. CPU's pulling around 10 watts and GPU's pulling around 3 watts. So we don't have too much headroom on our CPU, but we do have plenty of headroom on our GPU. Finding the balance is the tricky part, trying to get the best performance while having a good looking game as well. I will be testing out FSR at the end of the video as well as trying to create the optimized preset with a good battery preset as well. Alright, now here's the boring part for me. When I was going through loading screens, mainly, my CPU temperatures would actually fly up to 97 degrees, which is crazy high. And capping your FPS isn't going to fix that. You'll still be hitting the high 90s when loading. So the only way to actually fix that is to place a TDP limit for the system, and that will bring your temperatures down while going through loading screens. Alright, now for our third preset, we're playing on Shadows of Evil using the high preset, and as you can see, this map is definitely more intensive than Kino. We are sitting at 40 FPS. We are using a higher preset as well. We are using the high settings, so definitely more demanding as well, but still getting 40 FPS. The game does stutter regardless. It's been doing it on low settings, medium settings, and high settings. So I'll be testing out the 40 FPS cap as well at some point. You don't want to go for 30 FPS with this kind of game. It will just feel too laggy. So I'll be aiming for a minimum of 40 FPS cap. But I might go for a 50 FPS cap as well. Try it out, see how it does, how it goes. If it stutters or not. But so far the game is looking really good. Don't really see the shadow issue that was happening on low settings. So the game definitely does need anti-aliasing. This is one of the few games that I've actually tested where even at native resolution, it does look a little bit pixelated at times. So you definitely want to use anti-aliasing. Alright, now finally we're playing with the extra preset, the final preset. It's basically a mix of high with a couple of settings turned up to extra. But even then, we're still able to hold 40 FPS on Origin. This map is definitely bigger than Kino. I'm not sure about Shadows of Evil, but I think it's definitely bigger than Shadows as well. Now at this point the game does feel a little bit more laggy than before. Even though it's not stuttering, it just feels laggy. So it's just something to keep in mind. The game looks fantastic at this res and at these settings. And as you can see, the actual system is halving the power between the CPU and GPU. They each get 5 to 6 watts, whereas before it was 9 watts to the CPU and 3 watts to the GPU. So if we could actually increase the power limit, we would see a decent performance boost as well out of this. Now one thing that I forgot to mention at the start of the video is I'm going to go ahead and try out the mods as well. See if the mods actually work. The modded maps and the modded guns. and see if they work properly on the Steam Deck. I'm sure they will, but we'll just try them out, see if there's any issues with them. Now for the optimized settings, we're playing the game at 960 by 600, so we are using FSR at this point. And I am unplugged so we can see how much power the system is drawing as well. And for the settings, I'm using a mix of high to medium settings, with a bunch of settings turned to low, like shadows. And I know I cried about the shadows on the low settings, it looks very jaggy and looks very pixelated, but I still went with it for the optimized settings. If you don't like how it looks, you can obviously go ahead and increase it to medium or high, but for myself, I'm playing on low settings. And as you can see, for the most part, we are able to hold 60 FPS. We do have some dips into the mid to high 50s, but this is definitely a very smooth experience, on Moon anyways. Power draw is still quite high. CPU is pulling 10 watts and GPU is pulling 4 watts, so we are pulling 25 watts for the whole system, which will leave us around with an hour and a half battery life, which isn't the best, but we'll be testing at 40 FPS and 50 FPS as well in a second, so we can see what the power difference is between the two. And one thing that I forgot to mention as well is that the FOV is set to 90 instead of 120. For the entire video I was using 120 FOV, but for the optimized settings I'm using 90 FOV, which is what I think they use on consoles. So it's a bit zoomed in when you compare it to the start of the video, but it definitely will help us out with the performance. Now comparing the actual quality of 1280 by 800, which is native res, versus 960 by 600, which is what we're using right now with FSR. The game is a bit more pixelated compared to native res, but it's not too bad as you can see. Definitely looks very nice still. You could play at native res still. You do have some GPU headroom to do that, but it will taking away power from the CPU, so you might run into some stuttering issues later on. Alright, let's go and try at 40 FPS and see how it does then. Alright, now playing at 40 FPS, we can definitely see that power draw is down to 18.7 watts. So around a 5 watt dip, which is not bad. It definitely gives us a little bit more playtime. Can play around 2 hours and 12 minutes right now instead of 1 hour and 40 minutes from before. Now playing at 40 FPS, the aiming isn't as fluid as something like 60. Normally in other games it does feel very smooth still, but you definitely do feel a decrease in the fluidity and the actual responsiveness of the game when you play at 40 FPS. Now it's not unplayable, it's still definitely playable, it doesn't ruin the game. Playing at 40 FPS will give you a bit more headroom on your GPU and CPU, and will let you play for longer as well. But if your playtime isn't really a worry, and if you'll have a battery bank with you, then go ahead and play at 60 FPS, no problem. Alright, now finally I want to go ahead and test that 50 FPS, because 40 FPS wasn't as fluid as I was hoping for, and we can't really hold a steady 60 on all maps, even with these settings. So I'm finding a good middle ground of 50 FPS. Game definitely feels very close to 60 at this point, very fluid, very responsive. And on Moon anyway, we are able to hold 50. Now one thing that I didn't test for is the high rounds. We're playing at a higher round, around 60 plus. There'll be heaps of zombies spawning in. That'll be very CPU intensive, so that might cause you a bit of FPS drops as well. But 50 FPS is running really well. Power draw is back up to 22 watts instead of 17 to 18 watts of 40 FPS. And 60 FPS we're using up 24 to 25 watts of power, so it's literally right in the middle of both. Now I did play around with the actual TDP limits with the optimized settings, and I couldn't really find something that was good. Playing at 7 watts was causing us too many stutters and too many lag spikes. Going up to 9 watts, it was still happening. Dropped the FPS to 30, and it was happening even more at that point. It was pretty much unplayable, so I just gave up on it. But right now, for the final part of the video, we're playing on Town, which is a Black Ops 2 map. It was never a DLC, it's actually a modded map for Black Ops 3. And I'm using the modded guns as well from Black Ops 2. And as you can see, it's running perfectly fine. I didn't have to do anything extra to make it work. I just went into the settings, started up the mod, and as you can see, we're still able to hold 50 FPS on Town. It's a very small map still. Able to hold 50 quite fine. The game's looking fantastic. The guns look amazing. So yeah, that's the end of the video, guys. If you made it this far, I appreciate you. If you found this video useful, if you liked it, give it a like. And sub the channel if you haven't as well. Alright, see you next time.